And we are live. I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of Heart to Heart with Bree. Tonight's guest is Juliet Nelson. Would you please introduce yourself to the viewers, Juliet?
Sure. Hi, Bree. First of all, I want to thank you for having me
You're
grace your
welcome.
stage to
You're welcome.
talk to you and your viewers about something that's very close to my heart. But before I begin, for everyone who's listening or tuned in, my name is Juliet Nelson, popularly known as, if you're from back home, Porty, right? My name is Grinny. Yeah, but in my role, my everyday role, I function as a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. And what does that mean? I tend to say, to make it easier on non-clinical folks, right? I tend to say, I'm a nurse. I'm a registered nurse who have gone on to advanced studies to become a nurse practitioner, which is a primary provider for, mental health services. And it's kind of a merge of the role of a psychiatrist and a nurse. Hence, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I've been practicing in this role for quite some time. I've worked in psychiatry and medical stuff, for a long time. But this is now my role. I love mental health. So here I am today to talk about issues relating to mental health. I know it's a topic that most would prefer to avoid, but
Yes.
I am happy to be here. And thank you for having me, Brie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And, tonight's topic is a conversation about destigmatizing mental illness. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I have shared openly about, going through therapy, going through the process. And it's been a life saving thing for me. And, I would really like the viewers, if you're in the house, please say hello. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to, to post them. So we're going to jump right into it. So, Juliet, what is mental illness?
So, Brie, let me just first say this. If we were to plug this mental illness thing in any search engine, right? Like what is? I know this is the information age, right?
Yes.
So we are not at a loss for explanations and so on. You go to Google and you plug it in. It's going to tell you a couple of things. But I tend to refer to mental illness first. But let me talk about mental health first. It's
Yes.
usually the platform in which I spring. I like to talk about health, mental health first before I start talking about illness. And I make a little note just to be sure I did not miss anything. But mental illness, right? Mental health first. Let me take a look at that. Mental health refers to your sense of psychological and emotional well being. Now, we achieve mental health by balancing all aspects of our lives: physical, social, emotional, and spiritual. Currently, I tell others about something called the 8 dimensions of wellness. This is where we base all the issues relating to illness, any kind of disruption in the balance of our health, we know that that's illness. But in for the purpose of mental health, again, it's a balance in our lives of physical, social, emotional, spiritual wellness. Anything outside of that, it's illness. Now, let me just quickly run over what is mental health and the components of mental health.
Okay.
It is where you develop your strength and realize your potential. You act interdependently and in a way that is appropriate for your age. You cope with normal stressors of life. You balance different aspects of life. You work productively and fruitfully, and you contribute to your community. That is mental health. It's just an interconnectedness of all of those things. Now, when we take a look at illness, it refers to a wide range of disorders that affect how you think, how you feel, and how you act. I tend to say, to make it simple, it's the head, the heart, and the hands. It's your thoughts, it's how your emotions kind of, express themselves, and the things that you do.
Okay.
That is where illness lie. We take a look at anything that doesn't look like wellness or health, and we are guided by certain criteria that tells us that there is illness. And as a provider or a mental health, specialist, I'm able to diagnose those things.
Okay.
Okay? So illness is really a, a, a it's different from wellness, but we again know that if there's a distortion or something that's happening that doesn't look like wellness, we start looking at this as mental illness.
Okay. Now, are some people genetically predisposed to mental illness?
Well, we know that there are a number of factors, Bree, that
Okay.
causes mental illness. It's not really one thing. There are many, many factors. And I'm going to go back to some of these factors. And by the way, who gets mental illness? Anyone. None of us are in a cocoon that protects us from that. But yes, there are some causes of mental illness. And number one, I want to stress physical causes, right? There are some things that physically can cause mental illness, and I will go over some of those.
Okay.
We have some psychological factors as well. We have stress. All of us can relate to that at some point, we know what stress looks like. We know that there are social and environmental causes as well. We know too that brain chemicals is to be considered a factor in mental illness. So I know that there's so much stigma out there as to what causes mental illness, and so we start to develop all kind of judgment, around the fact that someone's mentally ill, thinking that we know all the causes, but we do not, and that is why we develop so much stigma. But think about that. We also have inherited traits that can cause mental illness. We have hormones. It's not hard to look around now and see that, especially our women, right? We have some hormonal issues. Look at menopause, for example.
Yes.
That's a hormonal issue.
Yes.
And yes, the symptoms of menopause can look like some of these typical stuff that we call mental illness. So, yes, that is a factor. We also think about some of the experiences in the womb. What about women who are pregnant who use substances, right? So, yes, there are many, many, many causation. We have to take a look at many causes for mental illness. It's not just one thing.
Yes. Hello, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Andrew.
Yes. So, I like to watch documentaries, and I've watched several, like what they used to call the madhouse in
Yeah.
the past. And,
Mhm.
you think about how brutal the treatments were back then. So I have to ask you, how has mental health treatment evolved over the years?
Yeah, you are right. I remember way back when I was little, I've always read books and all that kind of stuff about the way, folks were treated when they just didn't act right. Right. So we've all heard of things like ECT, where, it was always portrayed like they put stuff on your brain and they shocked you back into reality. Right. There's still something called ECT. Right. Um,
Yes.
we think about TMS. There are so many. There were many ways of treating mental illness. However, there was also a fear factor, right, regarding the treatments, the way that when folks were kind of diagnosed with all kinds of stuff. But look, things have come a long way. We still hold on to a lot of fear, though. There are
Yes.
also times when will be portrayed like sitting on a couch, and there will be cartoons talking about the shrink, and there's just so many stuff that we've seen in the past, Brie, that scared us to death you
It's
know
true.
so these are all some of the things that, there's this stigma, because no one wanted to be seen as this mad, crazy, whatever words we're calling it these days, right? Now,
Yes.
look, things have come a long way. Mental illness has always been with us. And what I want to say to the audience is, we just sometimes have to be careful where we go to, and who we talk to about what we believe the thing is, right? You always want to
Yes.
talk to a qualified professional so you can understand really what's going on, and there are times too when folks think we walk around and like diagnose everybody, and because we want to treat everybody. No, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, we have come a long way. There are, by the way, many different forms of supportive services, and I try not to say therapy too much because folks just don't like that word.
It's true.
They think because we talk about therapy, it's like, so I tend to say, look, we all need support. And there are many ways now, from way back, ECT and TMS and all that stuff. There are many ways to go about stuff now. Yes, there's still medication therapy, but even myself as a holistic practitioner, I recommend multiple modalities to manage how we feel. I mean, a woman who's going through difficulties with menopause, you're not going to prescribe ECT, right?
Right.
We're probably going to talk about massage. We're going to talk about a little bit of acupuncture. We're going to talk about some supplements, right? So there are many ways now to approach managing issues relating to the symptoms we feel when we're just not feeling well. We do
Yes.
not have to be fearful anymore about the treatment of this stuff, because these are symptoms, like I mentioned, there are many causes. We just have to figure out what's causing what, and we treat it appropriately.
Yes.
Many different forms. And by the way, there are many different forms of therapy or supportive services. There is no one thing called like a one therapy. Yes, we have things like talk therapy, we have some interpersonal therapy, we have trauma focused therapy. I work with an amazing woman right now who does something called ART therapy. She's an amazing therapist, Bonnie Rosso. She's one of many who does this thing called accelerated resolution therapy, right?
Okay.
So we've tried to fit the supportive services based on your needs. It's not what it was then. We have come a long way.
Thank
Yes,
goodness. Thank goodness for that. And Andrew brought up Matthew Perry. It's like, reading, because I remember reading about his struggles.
yes,
And it just goes to show it's not about money, it's not about race, it's not about profession. At the end of the day, it's really about seeking the help that is needed.
yes. And we don't have to be afraid. By the way, I was reading an article where Harry and Meghan, right?
Yes,
Megan did an interview. She talked about her deep, dark days, right? And Harry, the very same thing when his mom died, Princess Diana.
yes,
I think the more voice we lend to this topic, and especially when you recognize that it doesn't matter how much money you have, the status you enjoy, right? Where you've come from, your race, your religion, even folks who are highly spiritual can experience symptoms of many of the mental illnesses that we see today. You know,
it's true.
Christians can experience symptoms of depression.
Yes,
Christians
it's
can
true.
be diagnosed as bipolar. They can be, right. Who are you or I to believe that we are exclusive? No, we're not.
It's
We're
it's
not.
true. It's true. When and I spoke with you about this earlier. In my 20s, I used to have panic attacks. And it was a very scary time in my life. And I felt very misunderstood. But it was how some people would talk to me. It's like when you're going through something like this, I think too often people are afraid of being labeled as mad. That word mad is associated with mental illness
Yes,
too
yes,
often. And I know in my heart that I was not mentally disturbed or anything like that, but there was a lot of anxiety. And I remember it was so frightening. But
yes,
I tell you, my saving grace was a couple of friends who treated me like a human being.
yes.
They didn't try to make me feel weak or feel bad about myself. And I remember my friend Carol, I hope Carol's watching tonight, but her
Mhm.
Carol and her husband Stuart, I
Yes,
will never forget them for how they treated me, because that was a part of my recovery. And the therapist that I saw, he
mhm.
shared with me about going through anxiety himself every time he took a medication for his heart.
That's right. Yes.
And it
Next.
really was so helpful. And of course, I did a lot of praying, and they wanted me to take lithium, and I didn't like how it made me feel.
Hmm.
So I made the conscious effort to cope with it, but not to take the medication.
Yes.
But therapy was very helpful, and I got to the point where, oh, Carol said she's watching. Carol, I'm
I'm
so
watching.
glad that you're
Yeah,
watching.
Carol.
But it was
You.
such a blessing to have a friend like Carol. And like I said, for her husband, I called her one night because I could feel the attack coming,
Mhm.
and she wasn't home. Her husband answered the phone, and I'll never forget, he prayed. He spent time with me on the phone, and Carol took me to see a therapist. I don't know if she even remembers this,
Oh,
but I tell you, it changed my life. So I'm like, showing some compassion, some
yes.
empathy, it goes a long way. Because if I did not receive that help from my friends,
Yes.
who knows where I would be right now?
Who knows, Brain?
Who
And
knows?
yeah.
And that's the thing. I'm not knocking medication because some people do need it. But
Yes.
what I remember more than anything is one day I was going through my purse. I was at the hairdresser,
Hmm.
and I had a bottle of pills in my purse. And I remember, and I can't remember if it was Carol that I was with at the time, but I remember saying, I need to stop carrying these pills around in my purse. But it was like a backup. I just felt like, maybe I should have them just in case I had an episode. And I remember a lady that was in there, she said, I've been taking medication for 8 years. And she asked me, how did you cope? How were you able to not take the medication? I told her I did a lot of praying, but also seeking help. And she said to me, I wish I would have thought about that, but I think it's too late for me now. So
Hmm.
it's like there is help available, but we have to be willing to
Yes.
seek the help.
Yes, and that is my point. You're absolutely right. Thank you for sharing that so publicly and openly, Bree, because this is these are some of the barriers that we experience here in this
Yes.
area of practice, where folks believe that they're alone.
Yes.
Folks, there's such universality to all of our experiences. It might have
Yes.
varying degrees, some differences here, but it's we if you have a brain, you're we're all the same, like literally,
Yes.
and that is why, of course, the brain is the most protected organ, and it's at the top of your health there for a reason. If
Yes.
the brain does not work, nothing works. Just so everyone
True.
knows that. If it doesn't work, nothing works. I don't care how you find yourself in life, how privileged you are, and everything else. If your brain does not work, that's it.
It's true.
It is important that we recognize that, yes, if it weren't for the grace of God, there goes some of us, because you can wake up tomorrow morning and life looks very different.
It's true.
You just never know. So it is important that we begin to destigmatize this stuff, because you would never know if it's
It's
not
true.
if it's not you, family member, or a friend. We need to be supportive of each other, because you just never know. I mentioned all of the causation of what we have found,
Yes.
that causes mental illness, because for me it is really important, and I think it is something that we all need to understand so that we can let go of our judgment, right, of others. Mental illness doesn't look like the mad people on the side of the street that you see walking around. Look, you got people walking around who are experiencing severe mental illness, but because they blend in so well, right? They wear their suit and tie, they look great. You just never know. Look
It's
at
true.
what's happened in our society today. Folks are bottled up, and you shake that stuff, and everything falls apart.
Yeah.
So, physical causes. People who have severe head injuries may experience symptoms of mental illness. Did you all know
Yes.
that, right? Physical issues, right? You get you have a head injury, you're never the same. The concussions, right? you kid goes on the soccer field or they go play football, whatever. I'm not saying that every kid succumbs to that.
Right.
I'm just saying you never know. You have if a mother, like I mentioned, takes drugs or gets a virus when she's pregnant, or a condition can affect her baby's brain and how it develops, right? So not everyone who is experiencing mental illness use drugs, or right. It's just different for everyone. Some
Yes.
medical conditions, again, can cause mental illness. Look, like what? Lupus, diabetes, brain tumor, vitamin deficiency. Yes, I prescribe supplements because there are times when I order a lab, and when I check, the clients, they B12 down, vitamin D, no nothing. So we have to supplement. Hormone change. And what about the thyroid? Right?
Yes.
That governs all of who we are, the endocrine system. So we know that there are physical causes here. And again, the psychological factors. People's mental health can become fragile if they're unable to cope with trauma. Look at all the stuff that's happening, all the trauma around us. A significant impact on our mental health, indeed. And we have nothing to do with it. We have nothing to do with the wars and all the stuff that we see around us, and the loss of loved ones. There are those who are dealing with the loss of family members, and they're right. So there are all kinds of trauma, negative life events, we call them. Even giving birth,
Yeah. Yeah.
postpartum.
Postpartum. Yes.
Did you know that moving to a new house is one of the most stressful events ever?
Yeah. I
Fired from
believe
work,
it.
being arrested, or even a minor offense can affect us psychologically. That's psychological factors.
Yes.
And stress, which, like I mentioned, we all know about that. What about social and environmental causes? People who migrate, just so we
Yeah.
know. Bree, you and I are immigrants. We have moved
Yes.
from one country to the next. We know you migrate outside of your country, you go to a new place, you can't cope, you have some difficulty regaining your balance.
It's true.
You don't have any support of your friends and family, right? You get stressed out, you can't relax, you're doing 3 or 4 jobs. So there are many things that can cause a dysregulation in your thoughts, your emotions, and what you do.
Yes.
That really sets the stage for a change in our mental health. And that's where we shift over to the mental illness. Yeah. So unless we know what's causing stuff, we need to just stop making it our call to be stigmatizing folks. You just never know what's happening to people in their lives. We
And
need
and
to be
and
kind.
and and that's the truth. I'd like to welcome Carol Jackson. I'd like to welcome Mikey Go and Irene Roper. Thank you so much for joining us. And Andrew mentioned taking certain medications, and he put just being black in America, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Every time. And
Yes,
he's right.
I would definitely agree with that. And as you mentioned earlier, circumstances, I can tell you when my son died and it was an unexpected death,
Yes.
that was a life changing thing for me. And I can tell you that the week that he died, I struggled so hard mentally.
Mhm.
And I got to the point where I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. I found myself like every time I went to bed, I
Yes.
was trying to dream, like trying to get into a dream state where I would go back to
Yeah.
the day before he died. So none of this happened. And I will never forget every morning I woke up, that disappointment. Oh my gosh, he's still not here. But
Yes.
I kept telling myself, okay, tonight when I go back to bed, tomorrow when I wake up, he'll be back.
Black.
In
Yeah.
my heart, I knew that wasn't logical, but I needed hope. So that is what I did. And I'm telling you, the morning of his funeral
Oh,
is
wow.
when I had to face up to the fact he is not here. I remember the police officer when he was talking to me, taking a statement, and he kept saying the deceased. And I remember saying to myself, why is this man referring to my son as a deceased? He's
Hmm.
Demetrius. He's not the deceased. It just was not making sense to me. And I can tell you that it's been almost 8 years. I've learned to accept it,
Yes.
but it's still a source of pain. It's still, I have good days where I can think of him and laugh at certain memories, but there are
Mhm.
days it's like, why did this happen? And it's like it's such a struggle. But I went through intensive grief therapy, and I thank God for that, because if I did not do that, I believe I would be in a mental institution. But it's how people treat you sometimes when you're going through an episode. It's like,
Yeah.
basically, get over it and move on.
It
And
later,
I would
yeah,
like to say to those of you, listen, if you're not in the if you don't have compassion, don't go on a mercy mission. You know,
I
if
like
you
this.
don't know how to help a person that's grieving, leave them alone and let them be, because all you will do is make their situation worse. You know, people like yourself, Julia, I'm telling you, will make a difference. Like I said, the intensive grief therapy, it helped me. But
Yeah.
even with the lack of sleep, not eating, it was such a struggle. So, life, like I had Angela Hope a few weeks back, and she said sometimes life be life in. And I am telling you,
Yeah.
that was something that the unexpected,
Yes.
those are the things that we have no control over.
Yes.
you
Absolutely.
know those can be the toughest things. So what I would like to say to the viewers out there, please do not be ashamed if you find yourself struggling. It is not a weakness. It's just like she said, sometimes life be life in. And what do you have to be proactive in your recovery, or whatever you want to call it. And you need vulnerability. I hate to be vulnerable, but I tell you what, I would rather be vulnerable with a professional like yourself than a person on the phone that the minute they hang up, they're calling everyone. Oh, you won't believe what she's going through. I think we need to learn to trust this process, because that's what's really going to bring the healing.
I agree. I agree, Brie. Thanks again for just being so open and candid, Um, and I tend to say, too, just to kind of piggyback on what you said,
Yeah.
folks do not understand that there is something I call the power in presence.
Yes.
You kind of just think you have to say something
Right.
a lot of times, but you could perhaps, you kind of didn't want to do that, but you kind of layer on the problems when you say
Yes.
things that are out of line. So, like I tend to say, just be there. Just be present. Just say, look, I'm here for you. I may not understand what you're going through, but just so you know, I'm here. If you
Yes.
ever need to call someone, or just so you know, I'm here. That's the power of
Yes.
presence. Because sometimes that's all you need.
True.
I do not believe most times we give advice as, we, I know it's just all of us. We're just humans. We give
Yes.
advice. Sometimes it's unsolicited. We don't really,
Yes.
yeah, but we just give advice anyway. But especially when someone's going through a difficult time, I think if you are not able or equipped, to speak the words, and, because yes, we're trained. I'm a trained professional. I also come to this with my own personal life experience.
Yes.
But I'm also trained to say what I say, because
Yes.
I understand the human condition from a psychological perspective, from a perspective where I understand brain chemicals as to what's happening at that moment. And that's why I prescribe stuff or I recommend stuff, right? So,
Yes.
but giving advice is something we do not recommend, especially when someone's going through a difficult time, because you can never walk in someone's shoe unless you've been there yourself. You
It's
should
true.
not be giving advice. So I tend to recommend the power of presence. Just be there, just be present. Um, but you did say something very important. I want to go back there. You talked about Carol just being that supportive person,
Yes.
and there are times when we find it very difficult to open up to folks, right? Even therapists, you go there, you
Yes.
don't know what to say, you don't know where to start, right? Because again, we come from a culture where nobody didn't tell us how to do this thing until we
Yes.
find ourselves in a little place and we have to open up. But I also want to shift to Carol a bit. What That's priceless.
Yeah.
Someone who is just there, who says, look, tell me what your needs are. We need to assess the needs of the person who we're offering services to so that we
Yes.
know how to meet you there. Whatever your needs are at the time is what she meant, right? It
Yes.
doesn't do any more fluff, because the more fluffy is the more confusing.
Yes.
Because while you're going through the grief process, you're confused enough already, right? So she
Yes.
was just there to give you the support. That's all we should do. Offer support and make recommendations.
Yes.
Folks should not be scared to talk to people like me or
Yeah.
to see a therapist, because clearly, I'm not sure if any one of us really, look, we're here to do a great service. And most times when we show up here, it's because we believe it's our purpose. I
Yes.
believe that I wake up every day with a purpose. Mental health is truly my calling, I believe. And as I layered that, with my nursing,
Yes.
I'm also a holistic person. Like, I believe that there has to be some balance of mind, body, and spirit.
Yes.
It is not to be feared. We need to understand it. Nothing is to be feared but to be understood. And that's what I believe in terms of mental health, especially for today, in today's world. We need
Yeah.
to understand this thing so we can move seamlessly through this difficult journey, because it's not easy.
I appreciate you saying that. So, that being said, I have to ask you, because I want those out there to hear it. Is it possible to recover from mental illness?
Depends on the causation.
Yes.
That's the answer. Depending
Okay.
on what's going on. Look, if stress is the problem, we teach you how to de-stress,
Yes.
how to prioritize, how to, you know, I tell folks about something called it's an organizational kind of a model, where I say, look, because some folks just have so many things wound up in a
Yes.
tangled web of computer wiring cord, whatever that looks like, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you just need to prioritize. And I teach something called organizational skills training, especially when I diagnose the little ones with ADHD, right?
Yeah.
Try to help them to prioritize what's first, next, what can wait. Why should you, to help you understand why you should not procrastinate? It goes for adults too. But I'm just,
Yes.
I do treat something called ADHD, where folks are just scattered, they're confused, they don't know what comes next, and so on and so forth. No fault of yours, but it's a neurochemical imbalance, right? But we know that that stuff can be managed.
Yes.
Not every mental illness can be reversed, because look, if this is an issue, as I mentioned, if this is an issue caused by a disease process, we recognize that we may not be able to reverse this stuff.
Okay.
We can manage the symptoms. The issue I see all the time is that folks diagnose themselves and they try to manage their way out of it, not recognizing that it just, if you continue in your folly, you're going to end up worse.
Yes.
So you just get some help, get some insight, see what's going on, right? And then a professional can help you. You just have to take the first step. But again, there is no death sentence with stuff that you feel. And I want to just shift a little bit to men. Men have some trouble with and struggle with their emotions. So they try to kind of be stoic and all that stuff.
It's true.
But I tend to say, look, it's better you just talk to somebody, see how it goes before you start to kind of pretend it doesn't exist, because it only gets worse. And then, unfortunately, some of these things we can't reverse, because not just men, but folks also try to self-medicate. They use substances, they're into alcohol, they're into all kinds of stuff to numb those feelings. And before you know it, they're down the slippery slope, right? When if you really had addressed the issue early, we could have helped supported you through the management of that stuff. So yes, some things, yes, we can reverse, but some stuff, it's sometimes very, very late.
You pretty much answered the next question that I had, which was, too often people in need of treatment choose not to do so. And what would you say to those who choose to avoid treatment? Because I think it is a choice at the end of the day for
Yeah.
those who, and because, think about it. I think that there are some people who have anger issues and they have so much going on, but it's like there's something there that needs to be dealt with, and it will manifest itself in so many different ways. And if they would have only just gone and
Yes.
sought help,
Yeah.
we could have avoided a lot of things. Carol is saying, I have a family member that needs help for mental illness, but is not receptive to getting any help.
We still, we have to respect the right of each individual. Um, if an individual, what we call, if they lack capacity, we
Yes,
try to go through legal steps to assign a guardian and so on and so forth. That's a whole nother topic there. But for folks who are able to make choices, we say, look, you do have the right to do so. You don't have to talk to anyone if you so choose, yeah, not to, So no one's forcing anyone to. This is not the day when you hold people down. Nobody hold you down and tell you have to do anything, right?
yes,
So, in other words, I'm saying we all have the right to make our own choices,
yes,
and it's a God-given right. And however, when this stuff infringes on other people, right, that's something that you need to be mindful of. We all need to be mindful of,
yes,
because you're a part of a family, for example, and you have, say, for example, anger issues, right? It's affecting the family. You have children, you have a spouse, right? And other people are in the line of fire for you with your anger. Well, it's something that you have to think about. How are your behaviors, your thoughts, your feelings impacting the lives of others?
yes,
And we do know that also in psychiatry, there are diagnoses of things called narcissistic behavior and borderline, all kinds of things, right? That sometimes we know folks just do not care,
yeah,
going to do whatever they choose, no matter the
yes,
impact in the lives of others. But I tend to always encourage folks, just a gentle nudge. Well,
yes,
I know you may not see this, but I tend to tell what I observe. I observe that each time you you're in traffic and you're at the light, you just get so angry if
yeah,
someone moves off before you do, right? And the next thing I tend to say is more loving. Like, I know how much you do not like getting upset, but help me
yes,
understand, what it means when you're so upset, and what tell me understand what it does to you. Just be a little bit more kind when you're addressing the issue. But if you would like to encourage someone to get some help, like I said, the three-step approach: something you've noticed, something that you believe out of love, that you know that about that person, they're kind and gentle, but help me understand what
yes,
has changed. And sometimes that strategy works, sometimes it does not. But again, if you believe, each one of us, there is something that needs to be addressed, it is worth addressing before it gets too late, it becomes out of hand.
yes,
No.
yes. My next question is, how important is being vulnerable to mental health treatment?
How, I'm sorry,
How
sorry.
important is being vulnerable to
Yeah.
mental health treatment? I know that, as I said to you earlier, I hate to be vulnerable,
Yes. Yeah.
but I realized that the therapy, well, the treatment that I went through, it helped because I
Yeah.
had to go there. I had to allow the feelings to surface and face them and be honest with the therapist as well as myself. And I felt like that, instead of putting up a wall. And I
Yes.
think that was very helpful. So how important is that to mental health treatment?
Yes. Well, Brie, as humans, we have a natural inclination to fear the unknown.
Yes,
Okay. So no one's gonna let down their guard. Like,
true.
we are very apprehensive in our nature as human beings. Like, I don't want to go to some place that right, but there's a degree of preparedness.
Yes,
But vulnerability, it's a human condition. I've never met someone who hasn't felt vulnerable at some stage in their life,
yes,
right? We are just probably feeling, you just don't want to let your guard down. But I started out by saying that this is also the information age, and we have come a long way in how we've treated many conditions. From a nursing background, I have seen now where diabetes is being treated differently, right?
Yes.
We do not manage blood pressure the same way anymore. We're doing that through nutrition and lifestyle and medicine, and right. So vulnerability, again, it's something we have to be very self-reflective. What makes me so afraid to talk to a therapist?
Yes.
We have to take a look at that. Is your fear that incapacitating or paralyzing that you are willing to risk your entire life, your entire family for one little conversation? Not to minimize that, but I'm just saying,
Yes.
just to have a conversation to understand a little bit, perhaps. Are you willing to risk it all because of pride or vulnerability? I don't know what we call it these days, but there are folks who are so proud
Yeah.
that they will not even. I run a full service telehealth practice, like no one's in person. I mean, I talk to folks all day long on camera or on the telephone. And there are many folks who would have never walked into an office if it was an in person relationship. They're just not willing to do that yet.
Yeah.
But now it's the time. Even now with telemedicine, we all have the opportunity to reach out. You don't have to be on camera. You can mute the camera or something, stop the cam, and talk to someone. So, yeah, we hope that the feelings of vulnerability will kind of just decrease over time because of the many options we have now to just
Yes.
talk to someone. We will never get rid of our vulnerabilities. It's something we have to live with. It's a part of the human condition. So,
Okay.
with that being said, we now need to measure what do we have here? What are we willing to risk? What is it? And that's something we have to self reflect and figure it out. But there are many options now to kind of just take the first step. That's also something. Taking the first step helps to reduce our feelings of being vulnerable,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The more
Yeah.
you dance around with fear and anxiety, is the bigger it becomes. It's not just a little teddy bear anymore, but it becomes a big black bear. So vulnerability is best managed when you face your fear. Just take the first step. But it's
Yeah.
okay to be vulnerable. It's all right.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
tell you, when you face your fears, I'm telling you, when my son died, it was like going to the funeral, because then it was like then I had to face, this is it,
Mhm.
this is it. And it was a very, it's, I can't even begin to describe how I felt that day, but it was something that I had to do, and after it was all said and done, my youngest son, he actually did not plan to attend the funeral. And I
Mm.
remember telling him, if you don't go, you will look back and you may regret it.
Yes, and
Because I'm
regret.
like, we don't get to do the funeral over.
That's
And
right.
this is your chance to say goodbye. And I'm like, if you can't take it, then maybe you can step outside. But if you don't go, it will really affect you down the road.
Regret is painful. It takes a long time to get over regrets.
Yeah,
Deal with the issue that you just faced. Regret is
exactly. And he told me, like, he was glad he got to say goodbye, but
yes.
he said he was glad he got to tell the world how he felt about his brother at the funeral. So it's like facing the fears, facing the finality sometimes of something like that. It's tough mentally, but I
Yes.
think in the long run it could be your saving grace.
Yes. 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 And doing that too, Marie, I mean, it really does help to kind of fortify your resolve. Like it really kind of feeds into strength and courage. No matter, even if you have to fake it. There's something that
Yeah.
says fake it till you make it. Just fake, just keep one foot in front of them. Just keep moving forward, no matter how painful.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And Sonia just made a great point. She said, finding a therapist that is culturally aligned with you sometimes makes it easier.
Yes, yeah, she's absolutely right. Yes, because like I said, there is something about the familiar. I
Yes.
still have some trouble with that because um, well, I'm experiencing that even in my practice. There are folks who, because they think they know you or you know them, they don't want to talk to you, right?
Yes.
You ain't go to church, and because the folks see you every Sabbath in church or Sunday school or wherever, some folks have a little problem with the familiarity, right? And
Yes.
some folks would prefer to go to others who are neutral, they don't look like them, and so on. But yeah, there are those who desire to see someone that look like them, who can relate to something about them, whether their culture, their religion, their background, and that's fine. But each person has to, she's absolutely right. Each one needs to take a look at what will be best for
Makes
them
them feel comfortable.
to help them be just to be the best version of themselves. Yeah, because the
Yeah.
support is here. We strive to do the best we can.
My next question is, please address those who see mental illness as a weakness.
You know my answer to that. They're
Yeah.
wrong. It's what we call a cognitive distortion. If you want to
Yes.
take a look at it, right? It's not true. It is a misinterpretation of what really is. I'm not sure on what basis they determine strength or weakness, because we sometimes have to look at how people, understand things.
Yes.
We all come to the table with different levels of understanding, right? So, what is your weakness? I think weakness and strengths are very relative. Um,
Yes.
there are some folks who look at some things that are weaknesses, and I look at them as being really noble and
Yes.
admirable. You know, there's something about someone who reaches out, picks up the telephone, and say, "Hey, I think I want to talk to someone." I think that's very strong. I
Yes.
admire those qualities. Um, I believe that folks who dodge, who stay under the rug, who hide in the closet, who covers themselves under the sheet of life, not willing to face stuff, not willing to talk about it, not willing to stand tall and say,
Yes.
hey, me too, me too. I think that is, again, incredible strength. So, again, you look at mental health as a weakness. Well, tell me about the chemical issues. Tell me about the chemical issues that might exist. Is that a weakness? The fact that you were born with some disorders? Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of questionable. Tell me about the inherited traits, right? Tell me about those things that may be causing some issues, right? Tell me about the trauma that is witnessed by some of our veterans, right? Who have
Yes.
gone to war, who come back with things like PTSD. Tell me
Yes.
about that. Do you think it's a weakness, right?
Right.
We need to now revisit. We need to revisit how we interpret things and stop labeling and anchoring all these diagnoses on folks that we have no clinical background to interpret. We need to be very careful. Strengths or weaknesses, well, who's to say, right? We all need each other.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's a weakness.
I am so glad that you said that. I'll move on to the next question. What are some of the things that should not be said to someone who is struggling?
Get over it. That's the answer. Right? Don't tell people to get over stuff. We are not at liberty to do that. Um,
I've heard that one. It wasn't until after Demetrius died that I learned about grief and sensitivity. I never even knew such a thing existed, and I would not have believed it until I experienced it.
it, it's
And the
it,
things that it's like you just can't believe that people, and in many cases these are Christian people saying these things, and that's the most hurtful part. But it's, please be mindful of what you say to others.
or it's in your head.
Oh my gosh, I hate that one.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
I can tell you, I mean, I don't know much time we have, but I'm telling you, I've heard enough to know that folks sometimes do not know what to say.
yes,
And they just say stuff and they layer more pain, right?
yes,
Um, they're like, oh, or they give advice and tell you what you need to do because they did that and that to fix, and right, or so and so. It's, but yeah, do get over it. It's nothing. Um, so and so, or they also tell folks also have a way of saying Just pray.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've heard that one too.
Well, the last time I checked, prayer, pills, all those P's, they come together. Look, I tend to say, as a Christian myself, there
Hmm.
was Dr. Luke, right? We go to the scriptures and we recognize that there were doctors and so on, and all in the Bible we talk about right, the Bible talks about depression, it talks
Yes.
about anxiety, talk about, right, Paul. Look, it's not just in your mind, it is real.
Yes.
Mental illness is real. We don't have to look forward to know now that it's real and it's hurting all of us. So do not go around throwing advice around or telling folks to pull up bootstraps, get over it, and all that stuff. It just doesn't work that way. The best thing you can do, again, there's power in presence, and there's also that advice you can give and say, look, I believe that you may want to talk to someone, even if what you're going through is nothing. You show up and
Yes.
nothing. I'm going to tell you really not that there's nothing, but this is how you can move forward with support, but do not just throw things around. It's not, doesn't do anyone a great justice.
What about those who, if it was me or when I went through this, this is what I did? It's like everyone is different. You
Yes,
know, it's like you can't set yourself as a standard for what everyone else does.
that's right.
So I think we really need to be very mindful with our words and our actions towards others.
Absolutely.
Um, my next question is, what are the signs of a mental breakdown? When we know that we should really be concerned for this person now, you know.
Well, yes, and I always like to make a few notes once in a while, but um, there is such a thing as crisis,
Yes.
and it is when things have gotten to a point where it doesn't seem to, it kind of presents itself where there is some form of danger to either yourself and others. It's where thoughts become irrational, where you just cannot think straight,
Yes.
but it is time. And especially we hear about, we don't have to worry about the word at this point because it's all over, right? You're seeing little
Right.
people, suicide, you know
Yes.
I feel like I want to kill myself, those kind of things, where people, the person has lost their natural ability to cope. They're just not even making sense. They're talking strangely, right?
Yes.
Or they're acting irrational, they're running around, and not just physically, but it's almost like it's a point where there is some form of helplessness, hopelessness, worthlessness, and it's being verbalized. Folks are talking so down about themselves and they have now lost hope. That is something that requires emergent care.
Yes.
In the United States, we have the 988, the National Suicide Hotline, where you will always have someone on the other end to talk to. You will never be redirected. No one's going to hang up on you. You want, right? So that's
Yes.
something that is in place now. But if you believe you're in a mental health crisis, you kind of know,
Yes.
because you just have lost all your ability to cope with life's normal stressors. So that is when it is time to get some help. But before that, just a few points to note before it gets there. These are some of the warning signs. If you recognize that someone's saying stuff that sounds very strange, they're hearing things or seeing things that do not exist, they seem very tired or very little energy for a period of time, 2 weeks or so, they believe that someone's trying to harm them, right? And they feel so sad and depressed over time. They're feeling so guilty about everything. They have suicidal thoughts. They've stopped taking care of themselves. They're not brushing
Yes.
their teeth. They're not bathing. They're not changing their clothes. They're not going to work. They're also isolating themselves from others, locking up themselves in their room. They're not leaving the house or anything. Or they're just experiencing such conflicting and disturbing thoughts, right? It's heading to a crisis. So you really want to call someone. And I tell folks, listen, you don't have to call a psychiatrist right away. You talk to your primary care doctor. Everyone needs one of those. Go to your doctor's office and tell them this is how you're feeling, and they will make the direction moving forward, right? They call folks like myself or they usually collaborate with someone. Okay. But
Yes.
988 is also that crisis hotline. We hope it never has to get there though.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for joining us, Maxine. And Maxine is joining us late, and she's saying, wow, interesting. I definitely need to watch the rerun. Yes, please do, Maxine. So, how do we approach someone who is clearly struggling?
Yeah, well, it depends on who that someone is. I
Yes,
mean, we there are times too when our very own do not trust when we say, hey, they
it's
think
true.
we're like coming down on them hard or a little judgmental. But like I mentioned earlier, there are three little things that I tend to do. It's something that I observe because then they won't be able to contradict what I've seen. I
Hmm.
noticed that you've been sad for about, 2 weeks now, or, you have a friend who you've just noticed a change a little bit. If it's a friend, you can easily nudge them a little bit and say, hey, I know it's a little awkward for me to say this, but I noticed a little something.
Yes,
Right? I think a friend would trust you. I know how much we always like to hang out, and the last few times I've called you, you've not even picked up your phone. Tell me what's going on, or help me understand. What's going on. Typically, we try to find the folks who are closest to the person that you're trying to recommend services for, because you really can't recommend folks to see anyone if you do not know their baseline.
yes,
You might just be a quiet person. I mean, who am I to come and tell you you need help? If you're
right.
just a quiet person. So I tend to say, just be very kind. Approach it from a space of, it's what we call objective stuff. People, what is subjective feelings are what you're feeling. Objective things are what you, the observer, just noticed. Tell someone what you have noticed. They can
Yes,
say yay or nay, but if you know them, there's a degree of familiarity. You say, hey, I know who you are. I know how you love having fun. You've not been
yes.
having fun for the past 2 weeks. Tell me, help me understand. I think that's one of a good way to approach it. There's no one way, but this is something I usually recommend, and it's usually well received.
Yeah, I think, on my job, like sometimes it's very stressful. And I remember when I think it was right before COVID started, but
Hmm.
I just gotten back into some old habits. And I used to stop before coming to work and get a box of Mike and Ike's every single day.
Hmm.
And I remember I would just open it and I would sit at the desk and I would just literally just pour them in my mouth, and that's how I would eat them. And I will never forget, the manager came to my desk one day and he said, I'm sick and tired of watching you do this every day. And
Hmm.
he threw them in the trash. And I remember feeling like, wow, is it really that bad? But when I knew it was bad, one of the drivers said to me the next day, he said, Miss Bridget, I watched you eating that candy and I just didn't feel good about it. And it's something simple, but I remember feeling like, okay, I'm glad they care about me to say
Enough to say
something.
something.
And
Yeah.
that's how I had to take it. And I'm like, you know what? They care about me. And that's why they're saying this to me. So I
Yeah.
think sometimes it's like to receive it the way it was intended, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. But I think everyone, we need to approach folks with respect.
Yes,
No, you should not
definitely.
be judgmental in your approach. Because you just
Definitely.
never know what folks are going through,
It's
and
true.
you just
It's
don't know what
true.
folks are going through. You shouldn't show up chastising people and judging
Right. It's
them what
true.
they're doing wrong. I tend to say, never show up telling folks
Right.
wrong. Right? Tell them
It's
what you
true.
notice.
Because
Tell
you don't want to feel like you're embarrassed. You're
Yeah.
embarrassing someone, or, making them feel ashamed of
Yes,
whatever it is.
you're gonna naturally put the brick wall right there. Is you can get penetrate that stuff if you're trying to bring across a good message. So yeah,
Yes.
you non-judgmental way. You kind of just a gentle nudge, and you say, and if there's someone you may not know this person, but you may say, hey, I've seen and so on and so forth. I don't think that's an appropriate thing, and you start questioning things. And again,
Yes.
we just have to find a way where we can all figure out how we can move forward with that. But we need to also bring things to folks' attention when you see
Yes.
stuff that doesn't look good, too good.
Yes,
and that's a
definitely.
potential to harm them.
Definitely. What can we do to protect our mental health? You mentioned some of it earlier. If you don't mind mentioning some of it again.
Well, depending on what's going on, we need to look at those, in isolation, kind of. But overall, how do I stay mentally healthy? Well, here are a few points. Eating nutritious food. We need to eat well, right? Because our bodies depend on it. We need to exercise. We need to get some sleep. We need to sleep well, right? We need to take part in activities that bring enjoyment and confidence because it really feeds into our mental health. We need to also set achievable goals and work towards reaching those goals. I tell folks every day in my practice here at the new My Body Connect about setting smart, like smart goals, right? Smart. Many folks not sure if we all know what those are, but they are specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're realistic, and they're time bound. There are times when we must set short-term goals and
Yes.
long-term goals. Short-term goals helps to boost our confidence, right, towards the long-term plan, right? We also need to seek help to overcome obstacles. In other words, talk to somebody, church, nurse, your doctor, your family member, someone who is trusted and someone who will help to support you, right? Bounce it off a friend. Build meaningful and supportive relationships. When I think about what we've all gone to Titchfield High School, right? I
Yes.
know a lot of your viewers might not be from Portland or Port Antonio and Titchfield, but when I take a look at some of the friendships, even the ones that my husband has with his friends from all these years, including yourself,
Yes.
I wonder how has these friendships fortified? Like how did we ever have friendship that spanned 30 years, 40
Right.
years?
Yeah, it's the truth, and it's like a lifeline.
Yes,
It's a lifeline because I think of the friendships from Titchfield that go back to like the 70s. I
yes,
think of like my friendship with Carol. Like I met Carol when I was 19 years old and I'm now 60, you know? So
it's like
it's like, these long-term friendships.
yes,
It's
meaningful.
yes,
I mean, Brie, it's crazy. So we must learn to again foster our mental health by building meaningful and supportive relationships. That's very important and it's
very.
priceless these days. Because when we all go through life, hurt pitfalls and valleys, and we're climbing those mountains, it's the friends that come to support you. It's the friends that you can bounce something off, and when you laugh, the laugh is like so belly laugh, like it's so
Yes, it's
beautiful,
true.
right?
It's
And
it's
that's
it's true.
incredibly therapeutic. Doing fun things with friends, family, and persons with shared interest. We need to get involved in hobbies and just little things, that every day just makes us feel so good. And also having an occupation and the means to meet basic needs. It's very important that we every day not we don't have it doesn't have to be big. It's look, like I always say, it's not $1 million issue,
Right.
it's a dollar issue. Like you must understand how you make do with $1 before you get a million. Because when you get a million, you're going over your head.
It's true.
Begin with the just be simple. Live life simply. Right. So
It's
having, like I
true.
say, having an occupation meet your basic needs, just meet the basic needs until we can, because a lot of times we bite off more than we can chew, and that's where stress comes in, you know.
That is so true. I'd like to welcome my cousin Ruthlyn Taylor, and she said, interesting topic and some very good points. And Andrew is saying pets. Now, I'm not a pet lover, Andrew, but I know there are some people, pets really do make a difference in their
Yes.
lives.
Yes. If you're able to, because pets also need to be supported, right?
Yes.
We cannot pour from an empty cup, right? So for those who are able to afford a pet, we have evidence to show that pet therapy is has its value. We know that, including the veterans, right? We do have
Yes.
the dogs and so on. So yes, there are many different approaches to managing that, but the basic things that we can do, like just to reiterate, eating well, exercising, getting good sleep, setting good goals, achievable goals, help seek help to overcome obstacles, supportive and meaningful relationships, doing fun things with friends, working hard, working smart, and stay balanced.
Yes.
Those are some things that
That
are
that
important.
that is extremely important. And how would you tie in spirituality? Can spirituality help?
Yes. So absolutely a personal relationship, right, with God is, we understand and we know and we have experienced, right, that connection to what we call the greatness outside of all of us.
Yes.
It is anchoring, and whatever our relationship is with God, whether you are there are some folks who do not practice, and I'm not here to tell folks how to do this, but we say, look, when you look outside of yourself, what do you see? What do you experience? Remember, I started by saying, mental health, mental wellness and balance. It's
Yes.
really a consideration about your thoughts, is what you think, how you feel, and what you do. Well, there are folks who, when you look outside of yourself and you're connected to a greater good, or someone greater than yourself, right? We as Christians say it's God, Jehovah,
Yes.
Yahweh, whoever we call him, right? So again, that connection is made through a personal relationship, right? We're not here to act the part and so on. It's a relationship, and that also bolsters your mental health, your belief, of course, in
Yes.
God. Mhm.
Definitely. Sonia says, checking on friends and families that are known to be the strong ones. Those are the people that sometimes need help the most.
Yes, yes, because look, we know that we're very facade driven people, especially with social media today. Everyone looks good and perfect on the thing, but deep down inside, you don't know what folks are going through. People
It's
are
true.
hurting, no matter what you look like, you're hurting
It's true.
until we get the shock of our lives that folks just hurt themselves and they're no longer with us and they find them all, right? We know now, we don't have to pretend. All that glitter, it's not gold.
It's true.
So we are now mindful people, recognizing that we're all, like you say, Brie, vulnerable.
Yes.
You may look good today, but deep down inside you're hurting. We've seen that all over television, right?
Yes.
People are hurting, and I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you have, where you live, all your accolades behind the name. Everybody is hurting at some level. The way we cope and balance, and your resolve, your commitment to be intentional about grounding yourself and becoming mentally well, it's a personal thing, but we have the opportunities now to do so. So we have to start looking in that direction. We all need to do so.
Okay. And for those who are interested in your services, how do they contact you?
Yes, so I am currently offering services via telehealth, right? And if you were to go online, you put in a new Mind Body Connect. That is the name of my practice. I'm licensed in the state of Florida to see folks wherever you live here in the state of Florida, and it is done via video. I intend soon to offer an in person service, and I will be based in South Florida in the West Palm area, and I'm working on that. So I'm not offering in person just yet, but that's my goal. But for now, you can reach me at a new Mind Body Connect. You go online and go on Google and you put that stuff in, and I'm right there. I'm also on psychologytoday.com. So you go on psychologytoday.com and you put in my name, Juliet Nelson, and you will see me there, right? You can also call 866, I don't know who you put that number, but anyway, 866-738-0854, right?
Repeat that again. Repeat the number again.
866 738 0854. So that's 866-738-0854. You can also send me an email at jnelson at a newmindbodyconnect.com. Right? So it's J Nelson, the beginning, first letter of my first name, J Nelson at anewmindbodyconnect.com. Name of my practice again is anewmindbodyconnect.com. You can certainly go online and put it in Google and you can read about me. Okay.
Don't be afraid to reach out. And Maxine Forrester,
Maxine.
Davis, she says, great guest, Bree. She said, Juliet is one of Titchfield's nice and always beautiful past students.
Maxine. Oh, thank you.
And I tell you, Maxine is another example
Yes, I
of
know.
a good friend, because I'm telling you, a few years back I just was off social media. I
Yeah.
wasn't in touch with anyone. And I remember Maxine had a tough conversation with me, because Maxine and I are very close.
Yes.
And I changed my number. Maxine didn't even have my number. And she'd ask me, like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
And I was honest with her, like, I was going through a very difficult time and I am sorry, and it wasn't intentional. But we had that tough conversation, and our friendship is even better than ever.
Rights
She
and
was
friendships.
supportive, right? She was just supportive. And when my dad died, I will never forget, she called me and she said, Bree,
Mm,
please don't get depressed again and drop out on us. She said, please
here for you.
don't do that. When you have support like
Yes.
that,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
it
Yes.
it it makes all the difference in the world. So,
Yes.
Carol, I'm glad you tuned in tonight. I'm hoping that you will show this video to Stuart, your husband, because this was 30 years ago that you guys were there for me. And like I said, I'm a 60-year-old woman today. And, you know, it's just that act of compassion
Yes.
and just having a little bit of empathy and understanding. I think that goes a long way. It
Yes.
really does. It
Yes.
really does. And Carol is saying, awesome show, ladies. And Carol, thanks. She said, I'm so proud of you, Bridget. Thank you for
Yes.
saying that, Carol. I mean, thank you so much. We were both military wives together, and our
Mhm.
kids grew up together. We were pregnant at the same time. We've gone through all these things. And Maxine is saying, love conquers all.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
do agree with that. And, Juliet, when I know we laughed about how the last time you came, it's been almost a year.
I
So
know. I
I'm
told
hoping that you'll come back again soon. This was
her.
such a wonderful, informative session. And I would like to ask you, do you have any closing thoughts for the viewers?
Yeah. Well, I also always like to end by saying, look, your mental health matters. You matter. We need to make a commitment to support each other, learn as much as we can from the right sources,
Yes.
and talk to someone. It might be nothing, it might be just nothing, but allow someone who understands this to tell you it's nothing or it's
Yes.
something. So we're not running away, right? With all kinds of fallacies and so on. And again, because again, Brie, we can relate to this. It's our culture. We just
Yes.
don't averse to that stuff. But it's time because our mental health truly matters. So get some help today. Make a recommendation for someone to get help if you believe that someone needs help. And
Yes.
don't forget to reach out. And we're here to help, to be supportive. Mhm.
And guys, if you don't have Juliet's information, message me. I'll put her in touch with you. And I would like to say to those out there, just remember, it's not a weakness, you know, to need help. Your husband is saying, great job, ladies. Thank you so much, little brother. Thank you so much for saying that. But we really have to be our brother's keeper. And I think it's so important where we can feel comfortable enough to reach out to others, and to be supportive. And not, what I think back to the book of Job, when Job had lost so much and his friends sat and cried with him. But when they opened their mouths,
Yes, I know.
it was a totally different situation.
Right. Yes.
So we have to be mindful of how we treat each other. But let's remember, mental illness is not a weakness. Let's take care of our mental health. And once again, Juliet, thank you
You
so much for this informative session. And I hope that you'll come back and join us soon. I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful upcoming week. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Good night and God bless.
Take care. Good night. Thanks.